Just keep it off the books, not secret. It's off the books. Joey Jugs.
Thank you again for joining me. I'm back. Took a couple of days off. You know, I'm a business owner. I got tons of other stuff going on. I'm telling you, I'm not stopping. So I am back tonight. I know it's a late night, but I was going to do like a really interesting live stream. I woke up and I watched this video by Matt Walsh, and he always has some information that I really never took into consideration before. It's really deep and probably going to be highly offensive to the people that, you know, already have a preconceived notion about this. It's called Everything That You Are Told About the Civil Rights Movement Was a Lie. The dude breaks it down, and you know what we're all about here? It's like, you know, a disagreement without a refutation should be fully disregarded. So if you see anything here that you think that you can refute, I'd love to hear it. Drop it in the comments section. But you know what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch this and we're just gonna enjoy and you know, this stuff is mind blowing. So I think that you guys are gonna be, I think you guys are gonna be absolutely blown away. So yeah, let's get it.
Today marks the launch of one of the most significant projects I've worked on in my entire career. That is the real history of the civil rights movement on the Daily Wire. This is a two-part series about the largest and deadliest con job ever perpetrated against the American population. The civil rights movement and its aftermath in terms of the number of lives lost and the damage that it's done to our nation was comparable to the bombing of Hiroshima, and that is not an overstatement.
Already coming with a crazy comparison that the civil rights movement was that damaging, that it was completely a negative. I've never really thought about it like that, but when he breaks it down, you're just like, I can't defend it. I can't defend it. Super interesting.
The disastrous effects of the civil rights era still define our society to this day, and that's why you're not allowed to even think of criticizing this movement or its leaders. And once you begin to ask questions and look for answers, just the other day, NBC News, of all places, illustrated precisely why every American needs to reevaluate what he knows about this supposedly sacred period in our history. Because you see, no matter how knowledgeable you think you are about history in general, no matter how many books you've read or documentaries you've watched, you don't fully understand any of it unless you pay attention when history is being written in real time right in front of you by corporate media outlets and academics, the education system. Once you've witnessed a major event of national significance and then you see how news outlets and politicians immediately lie about what happened, then you begin to realize that there is no historian and no primary source that you can actually fully trust. It's one of the most eye-opening revelations you can have, and every serious person needs to experience it. The version of history that you were taught in school, particularly concerning the most important developments in the last century or so, was written by the same kind of people who will look you in the eye today and fabricate everything they say. People who have no credibility whatsoever. Now, by far the most consequential series of lies that you've been taught were designed to spread a false narrative about the so-called civil rights movement. Think of how many times you were taught that Martin Luther King led nonviolent protests, or that black protesters.
That's all I heard. I've always heard that Malcolm X was the one that was like, you know, kind of not as peaceful, but Martin Luther King was all peace, was completely peaceful all the time. So that's what was told to me. So
Engaged in peaceful sit-ins to protest racial injustice. And then take a look at this news headline, which was published a couple of days ago by NBC News. Quote, Kyle Rittenhouse, who gained fame for opening fire at a 2020 civil rights rally in Wisconsin, was hospitalized after he was bitten.
Wait. Is that not crazy? This is NBC News saying that Kyle Rittenhouse opened fire at a 2020 civil rights rally. That was a violent riot, BLM riot.
By a venomous spider, the noted firearms enthusiast says. Now, if you were watching SNL on Saturday, you heard pretty much this exact same line on the Weekend Update segment. Yes, Kyle Rittenhouse opened fire at a 2020 civil rights rally, we're told. A civil rights rally. That's how NBC News, one of the largest news organizations on the planet, has chosen to describe a BLM riot that in a span of just 2 days caused more than $50 million in property damage, including an arson attack that destroyed a used car dealership and 100 vehicles on the lot, the destruction of several city-owned garbage trucks, the firebombing of the county courthouse, and the ransacking of a large supermarket. The county declared, of course, a state of emergency. The National Guard was deployed to this civil rights rally.
Yeah, does that sound like a civil rights rally? Like, multiple people died in this. Multiple people died in these riots. So.
On the third night of the rioting, Kyle Rittenhouse, as you know, joined other armed civilians to prevent more destruction. So the mob targeted him, beginning with a crazed pedophile named Joseph Rosenbaum, who was just released from a mental asylum that same day. Rosenbaum couldn't get his bipolar medication because the pharmacy was closed due to the riots, so he decided to chase Kyle Rittenhouse instead, forcing him to fire in self-defense when he was finally cornered. And when the rest of the mob caught up with Rittenhouse, including one man who attempted to beat Rittenhouse with a skateboard and another who pointed a loaded gun at him, Rittenhouse again defended himself. Now, there's no dispute about any of this. It was all caught on camera, which is why Rittenhouse was acquitted. Less than 6 years later, NBC News has decided to...
He was acquitted.
...to memorialize all of this extensive left-wing violence as a civil rights rally.
Insanity.
Because that's how they want future historians to document the riots in Kenosha.
So basically from here on out, like what he's saying is from here on out, history is going to say that these BLM riots that we all seen, people burning down, automotive centers and ransacking Targets and, just utter destruction. They're just in the future, they're just going to be considered civil rights rallies. That's what they're going to be considered.
And of course, future historians will oblige. Instead of recording the violence in Wisconsin, which was mostly committed by Antifa communists and black radicals, the historians will write about how Kyle Rittenhouse descended on a peaceful, nonviolent civil rights demonstration and opened fire.
Insane.
That's the goal. They want future generations of school children to believe a complete inversion of reality, one that valorizes the left-wing agitators, even the left-wing terrorists, and portrays any white man who tried to restore order as a dangerous, unhinged bigot.
And I hope you guys know, I hope that it's not too far along in the timeline that you guys have forgotten the whole story of Kyle Rittenhouse. The kid was an absolute hero. He went out to defend buildings that were being ransacked and looted. Then he was attacked. You know what I mean? And and I guess that's what history is going to go down, and he's going to be the absolute villain. And apparently violent riots are going to be considered peaceful civil rights rallies. What kind of clown world is this?
And here's the point. That should make you wonder, if such a well-established media organization is willing to lie like this about a violent riot that everybody remembers in an era when everybody has social media and access to unlimited video evidence and information, then why exactly does anyone trust the narratives about peaceful protests during the civil rights era? If we have ourselves witnessed in real time as violent, barbaric riots were recategorized as civil rights protests, then what might that tell us about the so-called civil rights protests of the 1960s?
That now we're most likely lied to, and they were probably much more violent than we were told.
Now, whatever the explanation is, there's no doubt that throughout the country, an overwhelming number of people buy these narratives. In fact, if you dare to contradict any of these claims, you'll be labeled a dangerous MAGA white supremacist. Take this clip, for example. It's from a local news station in Portland, Oregon, from the height of the BLM riots. Now, granted, this particular news station is irrelevant, but I'm showing you this clip because it's representative of how pretty much everybody will respond today if you talk to them about the civil rights protests. This is something every history teacher in every public school will say. Watch.
I do want to address a question, though, that really surprised me early on, but we kept getting it over and over and over again. So I feel like we do have to address it tonight. Here's one. Hey, Dan, instead of Portland using CS gas or tear gas, why hasn't the city of Portland looked into water cannons for crowd control? So over the past 2 months, we've gotten, I don't know, 10, maybe more emails like this asking why police aren't using fire hoses or water cannons on protesters. So for those of you who know the history of the civil rights movement in this country, I would hope that the answer is obvious, but not everyone does. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. All right, police and firefighters, they've tried this before, all right? They used fire hoses and water cannons on black people during peaceful, nonviolent protests in the 1960s. This isn't just a spritz of water. I mean, these are high-pressure hoses turned up so high that they knock people over, that they literally rip people's clothes off. Hoses were used on protesters in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. Life magazine printing this very famous photo here of black high school students being forced against a wall by a hose. Children and other young people were also hit, along with being clubbed by police and attacked by dogs. These images drew national outcry, including from Oregon Senator Wayne Morse. He compared what was happening in Birmingham to apartheid in South Africa. Now, if you are familiar with that history, but you still think police should be using
I am familiar with that history. That's what I was told all growing up.
Fire hoses on protesters, then just don't email me about it, okay? If you're expressing an opinion just to be racist, don't do that.
Oh.
Because I'm not afraid to call you out on it.
Oh, that was racism.
Oh, he's not afraid. What a brave guy. He's a very self-important guy who's completely ignorant about what he's talking about, which is the norm for the news industry, especially in Portland. He reads teleprompters for a living and clearly doesn't know anything about history, and yet he feels very confident in lecturing his audience about the fact that, in his view, water hoses are an unacceptable method of crowd control because they were used by racist whites like Bull Connor to suppress peaceful, nonviolent black protesters, including children. And if you disagree on that point, then you're a horrible human being. You're a racist. No further discussion permitted. Well, first of all, water hoses were used for decades before the civil rights movement. They were used in all kinds of different contexts to suppress violent riots, especially riots involving union workers in factories. And there's a very good argument for bringing water cannons back because if you haven't noticed, Antifa shows up with gas masks to every riot now. But
I think we should, if anybody's watching this, should we bring water hoses back? I think, why not?
You can't wear a mask to protect yourself from a water cannon. Could have saved hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property damage in 2020, along with many lives, if police were willing to use water cannons instead of sitting around doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Rittenhouse wouldn't have needed to grab his AR-15 to defend a single small business if the police had used water cannons to clear the streets.
Let's go.
And secondly, when the self-important news anchor talks about children getting hit with these cannons, he's leaving out a very few very important details, one of which is that the children were chosen specifically by the organizers in Birmingham.
Listen to this, and this kind of coincides with the videos that I was covering the other day, and I'm going to probably cover that again. He did a whole special on it, where in Chicago, they're busing children in from high school to protest left-wing causes. They're not doing it for anything conservative and nothing on the right. They're actually giving kids the day off, and these kids can barely speak English. These are Chicago inner city high school kids, and they're giving them the day off of school to bus them into protests. And this sounds exactly like what they're doing now. Then
to go on the streets, deliberately commit crimes, and generate as much outrage as possible when the authorities responded. Authorities in Birmingham had gone to court and secured an injunction against these mass gatherings, which obstructed the roadways and caused obvious civil disorder. So the organizers of the Civil Rights March told the children to violate the law in hopes of attracting as much media attention as possible when the police responded to clear the streets. In other words,
crazy.
The police didn't go out of their way to harass or assault black children who weren't doing anything wrong. The civil rights groups told the black children to provoke the police and break the law. Watch.
Insane. Listen to this.
The Birmingham campaign reaches a crisis. Bull Connor and the segregationist politicians get an injunction against marching. Once you issue an injunction, violating that injunction automatically sends you to jail, and your sentence can be pretty arbitrary. It's up to the judge.
With the injunction in place, Bull Connor skyrockets bail amounts for protesters, draining organizers' funds so fast that they can't keep their promise to bail everyone out quickly.
We had a delegation of the black business community that was under extreme pressure, and they actually asked Dr. King and all of us to leave. And they said, look, Birmingham is too tough. This nonviolence is not working. That was the thing that threatened to kill the movement.
Nonviolence.
Short on funds and facing pushback from local leaders, momentum for the Birmingham campaign grinds to a halt.
The movement is imploding. Northern media are going back to New York and they're going back to Washington.
They realize that they have to do something that is going to capture the attention of the country. So it has to be something that is different. It has to be something that people just wouldn't expect to see, or that people would, be so shocked
Bring in the kids.
that they had no choice but to act.
That's when the discussions begin about whether to allow school-aged kids to be involved.
Are you listening to this? Like, I know you guys are into the sports matches and, you know what I mean, Pokemon cards or whatever, whatever you're doing. Are you listening to this? I was never told this. I was never told that, back in the day, I guess it would be considered now NGOs and, government groups or political groups started busing in school-aged children to join along in the protest. I was never told this. This is interesting. The same thing is happening right now in inner city Chicago, and who knows what other state.
All kinds of reasons for why using children in a campaign like this would be a powerful idea. Media from all over the globe is going to cover a march that is made up of children. But also, they understood what it would mean to see children facing abuse on television.
They did it on purpose.
Well, this is as far as civil rights activists and mainstream documentaries will go. They'll concede that they wanted to use the children as bait to try to get some sympathetic photographs when the police tried to clear the streets using a lawful, well-established method of crowd control, a non-lethal method, by the way. But the really interesting question is, did the police really sick dogs and spray water cannons at completely non-violent protesters? The news anchor in Portland seemed awfully sure of that claim. In his version of history, which is the default version of events taught in every school in the entire country for decades.
That's what I was told.
In that version, the racist police simply decided that they didn't like the peaceful protesters because they were racist, so they hosed them down. They were not responding to any genuine threat. Once you have a wife and children, you stop thinking only about yourself. It's part of being a husband and a father. Walsh 20, that's in 2020. And many other cities. Walsh 20, that many of the nonviolent protesters he's talking about were about as nonviolent as the Antifa and BLM rioters who set downtown Kenosha on fire in 2020, and many other cities. Which is to say, they were not nonviolent at all.
Not at all.
It's extremely difficult to find any accurate reporting on this topic, as you might imagine. No mainstream news source, even at the time, would provide anything approaching an honest report on these riots. So, in that respect, not much has changed. But if you spend any amount of time listening to the black activists who actually participated in these supposedly nonviolent demonstrations, here's what they'll tell you. This is an interview with a man named James Bevel. He was one of the organizers of the Children's Crusade in Birmingham, where the water hoses were famously used. Bevel, many times over, did preach nonviolence, but he also acknowledged that many of the demonstrators were attacking police officers. This is from an interview in the documentary Eyes on the Prize, and here's what Bevel said, quote, What I did actually was tell the students that they had to respect police officers, that their job was to help police and to keep order. Police were there to keep order, and that the people who was there throwing things was probably paid instigators, and therefore he had to watch them. And it was very effective. It started all the students to pointing at adults who had rocks and knives and guns, and the adults had to start dropping them because it would have started a riot, and a riot would have gotten off the issue. What's interesting, the students, heeding Bevel's call for nonviolence, pointed at the adults who had rocks, knives, and guns. They identified the people who were throwing things, most likely rocks, at police officers. In other words, indeed, this was not a nonviolent protest. In reality, in addition to participating in an illegal public gathering and blocking the roadways, demonstrators had armed themselves with deadly weapons. They threw objects, bottles, rocks, and so on, directly at the police officers.
No,
That's not according to Bull Connor or the local police. That's according to one of the black civil rights activists who led the march. Now, all this violence has been conveniently left out of the narrative that you'll find today in school textbooks. It's a very deliberate omission. Just like NBC News will flagrantly lie about what happened in Kenosha, the people writing the history books understand that if they're going to maintain the moral high ground, they need to airbrush history as much as they possibly can. If NBC News can call the Kenosha riots a civil rights rally in 2026, there's no doubt that the media could also flagrantly lie about these civil rights marches in the 1960s. If they can lie about what happened 6 years ago, they can lie about what happened 60 years ago, much more easily. It's not exactly a stretch, especially when you take a look at the kinds of cartoons that newspapers in the South were publishing at the time. Here's one from Charles Brooks, which you can see right there. It was originally published in the Birmingham News in the 1960s. It shows Martin Luther King Jr. declaring, "I plan to lead another nonviolent march tomorrow as the city lies in ruins behind him." Now, if you show this to anyone on the left today, they'll tell you that, well, this cartoon was part of a vast right-wing conspiracy to just besmirch the good name of Martin Luther King Jr. But the simplest explanation, which is that these civil rights...
And that's another thing, too, is I learned a lot about MLK in the past 6 months to a year. Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Turns out he was a communist, basically a commie. It's crazy. I thought he was like a Christian, nonviolent, like good, upstanding guy. It turns out like it's not true. It's just not true.
Rallies were actually extremely violent. Makes a lot more sense, especially when you follow the pattern up to today, up to the so-called civil rights marches we've seen with our own eyes today. And that's not even getting into the supposedly peaceful sit-ins that you're told about. You're supposed to conclude that it's totally peaceful to occupy an establishment without paying for anything while also refusing to leave. This is called criminal trespassing, but every single history textbook claims that it's a brave, righteous form of protest
Bold.
that nobody is allowed to respond to. Now, on that note, here's some peaceful black demonstrators leading a nonviolent, quote-unquote, sit-in.
You got a bandolier on.
In 1969, for example. They took over a building that didn't belong to them.
Let me see this guy. You got a bandolier on. How many shotgun shells? What do you think you're going to do? What are you doing? Going duck hunting?
And they threatened to shoot anyone who interfered. Pay no attention to the guns and the ammo belts. Peaceful guns and ammo belts.
Peaceful guns.
Never mind the fact that these black activists committed domestic terrorism and endangered the lives of everybody on the campus. History books just sort of skip over all that. This was a heroic sit-in for justice, and, that's that. Along the same lines, ignore the fact that in 1967, a large group of black students violently attacked the editor of the student newspaper at San Francisco State University because he wrote an op-ed opposing DEI programs.
I've never heard this.
That was called the Gator Incident, and you're not supposed to talk about it.
The Gator Incident.
And certainly ignore the large-scale riot that followed a year later, leading to the occupation of a university building and the response by the university, which was to implement, quote, programs to admit 400 ghetto students for the fall semester. Oh, and disregard the fact that in 1970, black militants kidnapped a judge, a prosecutor, and 3 jurors hostage and held them hostage in Marin County, California, seeking the release of black criminals.
What?
These mostly peaceful protests were not just threats and beatings. They were murders, too. Some were targeted. Others were totally random. Those militants ultimately killed that judge with a sawed-off shotgun taped to his neck. Angela Davis, a civil rights activist, quote unquote, who owned the weapons used in the attack on the courthouse, but denied any prior knowledge of the crime and who was later acquitted on all charges related to the incident, would go on to become one of the most celebrated leftists in the entire country. The left still reveres Angela Davis today, not in spite of her connections to the Black Panthers and radical violence, but because of them. Davis is the last living recipient of the Soviet Union's Lenin Peace Prize, which is a strange but fitting honor for a woman who was linked through the firearms to an act of domestic terrorism in which an innocent father's head was literally blown off with a shotgun. Then there's the fact that Pepperdine University used to be located in south central LA, but had to move their campus because white students kept getting attacked at random, and black students, spurred on by the Panthers and civil rights activists, quote unquote, nearly burned down one of the school's auditoriums during one of the many campus takeovers that kept happening. And we can't forget the case of Mark Essex, the New Orleans sniper who killed 9 people, including 5 police officers in 1972 and 1973. He explicitly targeted whites and was only taken out after a Marine helicopter pilot commandeered an assault helicopter.
Have you guys heard about any of these things? Or is this the first time? I've never heard about any of this stuff. Insane.
And picked up random police officers to open fire on Essex from above. I mean, that's quite a story. It's the kind of story you'd think everybody would know about. It's certainly cinematic enough for Hollywood to make a movie about it. But they never did. And the schools don't talk about it, and basically these days nobody knows about it for obvious reasons. Because you see this pattern where the so-called civil rights movement that we're often told became violent in 2020. Well, in fact, it was violent the entire time. It was anti-white and violent the entire time, from the beginning into now. It's kind of like with the feminists, where they say that, well, something happened with the latest wave of feminists, where they became anti-family and anti-man. No, they actually were that from the...
They've always been that. They've always been that, regardless if it was first wave, second wave, third wave, even pre-feminism. Before the feminist movement was a thing, the motivator that got it started was these things. So, yeah, insane.
The very beginning, the entire time, this is how they've been. Nothing changed. This is what the movement was fundamentally from the start.
The very beginning.
But back to the civil rights movement. Also buried were the so-called zebra murders, which took place in San Francisco from 1973 to 1974. They never get any attention whatsoever. At least 15 white people were killed and many others wounded in a series of attacks.
The zebra murders, huh?
By at least 4 black serial killers tied to the Nation of Islam who called themselves the Death Angels. And to this day, we still don't know the total number of white people who were killed or the total number of black attackers. The killing spree was inseparable from the civil rights movement. The San Francisco police had been thrown into disarray by an activist federal judge over a civil rights lawsuit related to diversity policy when the murders began. And when the police tried to use emergency measures to stop the murders, they immediately faced lawsuits from the ACLU and NAACP that shut those down. According to one professor, the zebra murders, quote, may have killed more people in the early to mid-1970s than all the other serial killers operating during that period combined.
And this is something that, again, I just learned about this the other day. Apparently, it was, I debate with a lot of different people. A lot of the black people that I debate with don't even believe that white people, that black people can be racist. Yet, the zebra murders was completely racially motivated. It was a racial a gang of racially motivated murders where they literally killed a lot of people specifically because these people were white. And maybe at the end of this, we can go into the zebra murders. But have you ever heard about this? Have you ever heard about the zebra murders?
A handful of suspects were eventually caught only because police were reduced to bribing one of the Death Angels to turn on his co-conspirators with cash, and the promise not to prosecute. The longest trial in California history followed. It was all a circus. All this to say, history, as you probably know it, is fake.
And gay.
MLK and the civil rights movement were
Fake and gay.
unpopular because they were correctly tied to mayhem and murder. All the crazy civil rights laws that we are undoing today were forced on the public by terrorism. Everyone had to accept the happy lie that it was only a peaceful revolution. You're not told about any of this anti-white violence in school. Instead, you're fed a series of carefully curated pictures and videos to reinforce the false narrative that black activists were noble and peaceful and were primarily interested in racial equality. The reality is the opposite. At every turn, black activists used violence, slander, and propaganda to achieve their goals. They staged everything very deliberately in order to promote maximum outrage, and to this day, they're still doing it. People are exhausted financially right now. Gross effective. This post got 5 million views, 64,000 likes, for example. Quote, the KKK is alive and well in Tennessee. The Sergeant of Arms blocks Representative Justin Pearson from entering a committee meeting about redrawing the map specifically for the district he represents. Effing shameful. This post is from Hassan Jeffries, the brother of Democrats leader in the House of Representatives. It also went viral. Quote, John Brown understood the only way to free America from the scourge of white supremacy was to get rid of white supremacists by any means necessary. He was right then, he's right now. Never mind the fact that John Brown was a delinquent, a traitor, and a lunatic who murdered innocent people, including a free black man. Now he's a hero in the Democrat Party because history is whatever they want it to be.
And that's the one thing about the left. They love making up history, making it up. But then, even some of the pillars from, the gender spectrum and John Money, and it's all based on a lie. Roe v. Wade and, the lady getting raped. It's all based on a lie. A lot of the pillars of the left, once you just do your research on them, you're like, wait a minute. None of this is true.
And they want more violence. Meanwhile, this post received nearly 20,000 likes. Quote, this is what Jim Crow looks like. Do not look away. And then one more with over 1 million views. Quote, modern day Bull Connor blocking the floor to the Tennessee State House floor from the only black member as they strip him of office.
Silly.
Kind of makes you wonder about the things you were taught about Bull Connor and Jim Crow, doesn't it? Even before we get into how stupid these comments are, I mean, look how effortlessly they invoke these historical figures and episodes. If standing guard at a door is enough to qualify you as Bull Connor, then we need to go back and take a look at who Bull Connor was exactly.
Yeah, let's do that.
Now, just for completeness, I'll mention that many other similar images that went viral as well from the Tennessee State House, we'll put some of them up on the screen. All of these were viewed millions of times from this recent episode. They're trying to look as oppressed as possible, like it's a replay of the 1960s. They're even putting the black and white filter on some of these images, and it has the exact opposite effect of what they're going for. It doesn't make you think these people are heroes. It makes you realize how fake the 60s were. Now, in the meantime, back in reality, Pearson was blocked because he is not a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. In fact, he's not even a member of the state Senate. Therefore, he's not allowed into a meeting for members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Pretty simple. He wasn't allowed in for the same reason they would have blocked me from walking in there. And Pearson understood that. He knew he wouldn't be allowed in. The whole point was to make a scene, lead people to draw the wrong conclusion from the photo, and agitate a mob. And indeed, that's what the civil rights movement was about.
Yep.
The Rosa Parks story you were taught in school was fake too.
I mean, imagine that. I was told about the Rosa Parks story. Go do your research on this. Go do your research on the Rosa. It was a complete setup. It was a complete setup. And apparently Rosa Parks' husband had a car. Insanity. Like, I'm telling you, that from the Underground Railroad, complete lie, complete propaganda. The Rosa Parks story, complete propaganda. A lot of the things that we were told in school, yeah, man, it's crazy.
This was not just some woman on her way home from work. Civil rights leaders thought Parks would make a sympathetic face for their lawsuit and then told her, a longtime NAACP volunteer, to create a situation where she'd be arrested. This gets sold to the public as totally organic when actually it's play acting to create ideal conditions for a court case or scandal. The iconic photo of Parks on the bus was staged months after the incident as part of a press campaign.
That's a
The white
stage.
man sitting behind her in the bus photo.
Listen to that. That iconic photo is a staged photo that happened after the incident.
Was a journalist, which you probably didn't know.
Did not know.
It's the same playbook all over again. Activist theater is presented as a profound, spur-of-the-moment stand against oppression to create an emotional superstructure for radical change. That's why Pearson has spent most of the last week pretending to be a low IQ ghetto revolutionary. Watch.
Oh, man. This dude's LARPing. This dude's LARPing like he's Malcolm X, a freedom fighter. He's LARPing.
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with
Look at him. I'm telling you.
stupid mother?
Bring out the hoses.
Every aspect of his behavior is an act. None of it is real. And if you doubt that, now's a good time to play the clip of Pearson from when he attended a small, extremely expensive liberal arts school in Maine. And then we'll contrast how he sounded then to what he sounds like now.
Let's
We've
go.
played
Let's
this clip
go.
a few times before, but it bears repeating just to emphasize how truly shameless these fake civil rights leaders are. Watch.
Justin J. Pearson, and I'm running for president of BSG.
This is the same guy. This is the same guy you just seen. The guy with the afro acting like he's a freedom fighter. This is the same guy. You're talking about code switching. This isn't code switching. This is LARPing. This is cosplaying. This guy's cosplaying as a civil rights leader right now. But this is him. This is him in 2016.
There are a few reasons that we're running this campaign this year. One has to do with representation. How can we represent all voices in a conversation? I wanted to do this by partnering with organizations from the Bowdoin Democrats to the Bowdoin Republicans. I want to bring together different voices, dissenting voices, voices that may be more liberal or more conservative, in order that we can reach a point of sort of the radical middle.
Seemed like the NRA and gun lobbyists might win.
I'm telling you, this is the same person. This is the same person. How can we take... These aren't serious people.
But oh, that was good news for us. I don't know how long this Saturday in the state of Tennessee might last. But oh, we have good news, folks. We've got good news that Sunday always
We got
comes.
good news. That's crazy.
Now, we could laugh at him all we want, and we should. He's a
We
total
should.
clown. Should not be taken seriously, but he's still doing
Not a
it.
serious person at all.
And he's still got a lot of supporters. None of them care that he's completely fake. And they all excuse it. They say, "Oh, that's just code switching." So if you could use a term to describe it, code switching, that makes it okay. Yeah, he's code switching, which is just another word for being fake and dishonest and phony. And indeed, Martin Luther King Jr. did the exact same fake pastor voice. No one cared that he was a phony either. People still listen to his speeches with that absurd way of speaking and pretend that it sounds profound. But we should just be honest, like it sounds ridiculous. It sounds phony and ridiculous. And it sounded that way when Martin Luther King Jr. did it. Now, I guess Noam Chomsky might qualify as an exception. He went on the record saying that while he admired MLK, he couldn't stand to listen to his fake voice. Watch.
Let's have a look at two newer examples. Now, that's from the Occupy movement, as you said. The 99% have no borders. That's the clue. It's quite a deliberately retro style, but here's a cause. I particularly singled this out because I thought, here's a cause that broadly you might be sympathetic to, and yet would you apply the label of propaganda to this image?
Propaganda.
Sympathetic to the cause, but I don't like this technique of trying to bring people in. In fact, I can't stand listening to what's called uplifting rhetoric. It just really turns me off. And for the same reason, this kind of thing, it's an appeal to emotions, not understanding. And it's obvious what it's trying to say, but...
so you don't like it even when it's in the service of a cause you may sympathize?
I can't stand it, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I can't listen to Martin Luther King's speeches.
Propaganda.
Literally, although I greatly admire him.
Because it's
just the style.
So there's some honesty there. And you see the other guy that he's talking to, he's kind of...
highly offended.
With the idea that he would say anything negative about Martin Luther King Jr. What?
What?
What? It's shocking. Because the image we're supposed to have of Martin Luther King Jr. is that he was a perfect human. Better than a saint. Now, even if you're on the left, though, we find from Noam Chomsky, you don't actually have to pretend to like all the fake melodrama from these black activists, the theatrical phoniness. And it's okay to tell them that they're phony and that they should stop, saying they're tired all the time. It's a nice refrain you hear all the time. But the bigger point is that, like MLK, Justin Pearson has a dream of inspiring a new wave of anti-white racial violence. And like MLK, he's doing the bidding of communists who seek to destroy the United States from within. And we discuss all.
Imagine finding out like that when you do your research, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna put down the sports betting and the corn, and I'm gonna stop scrolling TikTok, and I'm gonna do some research, and then doing your research, and then it comes back that it's undeniable that Martin Luther King was a communist. An anti-American communist that was being literally propped up by people that weren't even they didn't have America first kind of ideals. You know what I mean? They were progressive Marxists basically. It's insane to find out. It's like never meet your heroes. And I think that if you were to try to expose this on the grand scale, there would people that would be hit with such cognitive dissonance that they could never, ever, ever embrace the truth. They would have to deny it. They couldn't. It would just be too hard of a blow. You know what I mean?
All of this, by the way, in great detail in part 1 of my special. And as we go into Martin Luther King Jr., and all of the facts are there, all the evidence is right there. And again, with Pearson, the same approach is apparently working. Watch.
This isn't coincidental or accidental. They're coming for black political power in Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana. We're seeing the greatest purge of black power since the era of Reconstruction. Hands up! Our vote! Hands up! Our vote! Look at me! Shame! Shame! Look at me! Shame! Shame!
What we saw yesterday in the state of Tennessee was a political lynching. It is very much an era of retribution that we are entering into in the United States of America across the South, where 12 to 20 United States House seats that are black majority are at risk of being taken away, and nearly 200 seats for state House members and state Senate members are likely to be taken away by the rise of white supremacy and its attempt to solidify its power on behalf of the biggest white supremacist in the United States of America, which is the President of the United States. I was expelled in my other...
How is this possible?
The black colleague was expelled from the Tennessee General Assembly standing up
against
gun violence, while our white colleague was not. That's not accidental or coincidental. This is a part of who the Tennessee General Assembly is. But in this particular moment, we all have to stand up, speak up, and fight back from whatever positions we have in every part of this country. At the State House, in the governor's mansions, we need to be advocating and fighting and resisting, because what just happened in Tennessee was the largest and the most swift disenfranchisement of black people that we have seen in at least a century.
So it's a tough side-by-side because it looks like he stole her hair and put it on his head.
No, I was going to say
he attempts to power.
I was going to say the same shit. I was like, oh man, that's crazy. That's crazy. The haircuts were nuts.
Through it. He calls the Tennessee redistricting a political lynching and the disenfranchisement of black voters, even though black people can still vote. Just so you know, they won't have districts carved out exclusively so that black people can be a majority in the district. But apparently, if you don't have special race-based districts, then you might as well have no vote at all.
Like, for real. We need race-based districts. We need to. That's what our country was founded on. Our country was founded on race-based districts and race-based voting. That's the core fundamentals of America.
Now, to be clear about what's happening here, both parties gerrymander districts for political reasons. We've talked about this many times before. That's why there's not a single Republican congressman in all of New England. It's why 40% of Californians support Donald Trump, but only 20% of California's congressional delegation is Republican. The same is true in Illinois and many other states. Gerrymandering is an inevitable part of politics. You don't have to like it, but it's illegal and it's practiced by both parties. It's never going away, and they're going to keep doing it to the extent they can get away with it. What Democrats are specifically upset about is that a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court ruled that it's unconstitutional to draw these congressional districts on the basis of race specifically.
And that's a big thing right now. That is a huge thing right now in politics. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. Huge thing right now. You know, when certain things go to the Supreme Court, you know, they can get completely repealed, just like Roe v. Wade. And this is another thing. It's unconstitutional. It's completely unconstitutional. And yeah, there's a lot of people on the left flipping out about it, because if this gets pushed through, there's a high chance that, you know, that they're going to lose a lot of their power.
So it's fine to draw districts that benefit your party as a general matter, but you cannot draw districts to maximize the number of black people in those districts or to minimize the number of white people. Unless there's intentional discrimination on the basis of race, the Supreme Court ruled that the Republicans and everyone else can draw the maps however they want. And if the Republican maps happen to lead to fewer majority black districts, then there's no problem. Under the Supreme Court's ruling, no race of people, not black, not white, not Asian, nobody, has the right to have a certain amount of districts in which they are the majority. Obviously.
They don't.
Now, of course, drawing districts on
that.
the basis of race should never have been allowed in this country to begin with. It's unconstitutional. But
how was that allowed? I guess when we're in a country where DEI is popular and eventually where men can consider themselves women, anything can be done. But yeah, this has been done for a while now. And that's the reason why the left has a lot of power. You know, the power. Yeah. It's if this was taken off the board, they're going to be up in arms. They are going to be up in arms, backed into a corner.
In the aftermath of the civil rights movement, Democrats managed to convince judges, including the Supreme Court, that it's acceptable to draw districts explicitly so that they can include more black voters, even if there's no evidence of intentional racial discrimination and how the districts had been drawn in the first place. This was a massive political advantage for Democrats, who gained at least 12 House seats, mostly in the South, simply because they were allowed to draw majority black districts, which overwhelmingly vote Democrat. So that's what they're upset about. They want to be able to draw congressional districts on the basis of race. So they want to be able to they want to be able to racially discriminate, using the law because it benefits them politically. And now that they can't do that.
I mean, and again, they cry racism, but not when it's applied the opposite way. Like, you understand what I'm saying? There's a lot of things where it's like, when I get into these debates, I'll have black people being like, black people can't be racist. And it's like, do you understand by you even saying that, you're being definitionally racist by saying that only white people are racist and nobody else, blacks can't be? That's a racist statement. But as soon as you try to equally apply it, it gets thrown out the window. And that's where you can see a lot of this stuff falls flat. The left and a lot of the things they stand on. Yeah, it's just weak.
The left is calling for genocide of white conservatives. And that's not an exaggeration either. Here's one example. This has 3 million views and 70,000 likes. Quote, allowing the Confederates and their lineage to survive was a mistake. So they should have just gone and killed everybody. Every white person in the South should have been killed, is what that post is saying. 70,000 likes. Here's another 300,000 views, 16,000 likes. Quote, we should have genocided the Confederates. there's not really room for interpretation on that one.
And again, if this was equally applied and equality was a thing, this just shows that people do have a leg up. There are people right now that have, they have a little bit more rights than other people. Yeah, you can say things that others can't. There's words that people can use and others can't. There's crimes you can commit that where others can't. It's just insane. Yeah, but again, that's why we're here. That's why Off the Books is going to just keep on pushing. It's just to kind of expose this stuff and hopefully have you thinking kind of outside the box. You don't have to believe the narrative. You don't have to just, regurgitate the same propaganda that you've always heard, especially if it's a lie. The truth, 100%, it can be uncomfortable, but you know what they say about medicine, the more bitter the medicine, the more it works, Some of the best medicine, tastes bad going down, and that's the truth,
Another with similar numbers says, quote, "It's so obvious that the vast majority of this country's problems go back to our utter failure to properly punish the South." Meanwhile, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, just declared that the Confederate states are trying to erase black districts off the map.
Insane. And that's the whole thing, is if you know about, the Civil War, if you talk about things like slavery, there was a very small amount of white people that owned slaves. It wasn't the majority. So the idea that people are saying that everybody down south should have been held accountable, it's like, I don't know if that's true. The first legal slave owner was a black man. There was whites that were enslaved in our country. Chattel slavery, slavery has existed in every civilization. And the idea that, right now, when you ask, you can poll black people right now, I think it's 60+% of black women believe that whites exclusively invented slavery. Is that because it's one of two things? And I hope that it's not the latter. Is it that they believe the propaganda or they're just dumb? Which one is it? That they've been fed propaganda that they believe and that's their default, or they're not smart? I hope it's not the latter. You know what I mean?
So you thought that the Confederacy ended more than 150 years ago, but in fact, according to Gavin Newsom, the Confederacy is alive and well. Quote, "Confederate states are rushing through rigged maps to erase black districts off the map. If this doesn't make you angry, it should."
It doesn't.
This is the Democrats' most likely presidential candidate and the governor of the most populated state in the country, and he's now openly suggesting that the southern United States...
And remember, that's Gavin Newsom. He's going to be going up for the president, this next round coming up. So, that could possibly be the leader of, the new world. You know what I mean?
States are not actually a part of the country. He's floating the possibility of a civil war because the Supreme Court issued a ruling that prevents racial discrimination during gerrymandering. Along those lines, here's a post from a Pennsylvania lawmaker with 20,000 likes. Quote, "The new Jim Crow will be defeated like the old Jim Crow. We were tired then, but not defeated. We're tired now, but we will not be defeated. Weeping may endure for a night, but the morning is coming." Now, again, all these posts should make you rethink what you think you know about the Civil War, about the Civil Rights Movement, about all these figures that are so often cited.
Hopefully.
Black activists use the same kind of melodramatic language throughout the 60s and 70s. Really corny language, too, corny cliche that we're supposed to act like is really insightful, beautiful rhetoric. Morning is coming. My hope overflows like the ocean. I feel love burning like the sun.
Yo, man.
And if some black activist says that in a fake preacher voice, we're supposed to go, oh my gosh, that was this is the best oratory we've ever heard. But they lied just as often back then with no shame whatsoever. That's the key. That's the point we have to realize here, is that when you look at the so-called civil rights leaders of today and you see that they are almost without exception dishonest propagandists, that they celebrate violence, they commit violence, all those things, it would be inaccurate to assume that some sort of change has happened and that, you know, it wasn't like that back then. That something happened like in the 90s where the civil rights leaders were all great people and then suddenly out of nowhere they became...
Things changed. That's the thing to me. It's like history just repeats itself. You know what I mean? And yeah, I think that we've been sold a false bill of goods. That's all I'm trying to say. And then if you look at it, like, and then how about the outcome? Like, let's look at it from, let's just be honest. Are blacks doing better after civil rights?
Came evil propagandists. That's not the case.
Yeah,
the so-called
the
civil rights leaders of today are same kinds of...
Yeah, after the civil rights movement, obviously it wasn't done very well. It couldn't have been. It couldn't have been at all. The rate of, the rate of crime, the rate of divorces or unmarried, having babies out of wedlock, just every single like facet of the black community. It looks like, after Jim Crow, blacks had the most economic mobility of any race in our country. They had the lowest crime rate. They had the highest marriage rate. What happened? What actually happened? And who did it? Who done it?
The people that we had 60 years ago. And it's almost as if Democrats are now admitting right out in the open that the civil rights movement was not actually about racial equality. It was about exterminating the influence of white conservatives, ensuring that they'd be flushed out of major cities and population centers, discriminated against in jobs and schooling, and ultimately replaced by more compliant foreigners. What Democrats just attempted to do in Virginia makes their intentions even more clear. Democrats tried to amend the Constitution so that instead of Republicans having 5 seats and Democrats having 6, Democrats would have 10 seats and Republicans would have only 1. It was a flagrant power grab in a state where Trump won 46% of the vote. Republicans would have had only 9% of the congressional seats in Virginia. And to make matters more egregious, this was the language on the ballot that Virginia voters saw. Quote, should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in upcoming elections? So fairness in the eyes of Virginia Democrats means ensuring that Republicans can never hold office again.
That's fairness to them.
They don't say that on the ballot there, but that's what it means. Democrats.
And that's another thing too. It's like, if any of these, like, if they ensured like that you needed an ID to vote, if they just did it the right way, the left would have a really hard time ever winning. They have to cheat. They have to do the mail-in votes. They have to do the ballot harvesting. They have to do all of these things in order for them to cinch a win. Otherwise, it would be a wash all the time.
Democrats thought they were getting a moderate Democrat, and then she put this language on the ballot. Again, there are no moderate Democrats.
Not anymore. There is.
Every single one of them wants to make you powerless.
Yes.
At a minimum. But this language somehow wasn't actually the issue that caused the Virginia Supreme Court to strike down the amendment. The more fundamental problem was that the Virginia state constitution makes it very hard to pass a constitutional amendment, which makes sense. All constitutions are difficult to modify. So in order to pass an amendment, the state General Assembly needs to pass the amendment, and then there needs to be an election in which voters can get rid of any representatives they want. So if it's a bad amendment, voters have the opportunity to vote out any representative who supported it. And then in another session after the election, the new General Assembly needs to pass the same amendment. If both General Assemblies pass the amendment, then and only then, voters get to decide directly whether to pass the amendment. So here's how Virginia Democrats tried to short-circuit the process. Early voting in the general election for the Virginia House of Delegates began on September 9th, 2025, and ended on Election Day, November 4th, 2025. But the first time that the Virginia General Assembly voted on their constitutional amendment was October 31st, 2025. And by that date, as the Virginia Supreme Court pointed out, over 1.3 million votes had been cast in the general election, which was approximately 40% of the total vote for that election cycle.
Insane.
In other words, Democrats didn't give voters the chance to vote on the members of the General Assembly who supported the amendment. It was an extremely obvious violation of the law. And that's why in court, as they tried to uphold the vote on the amendment, Democrat lawyers embarrassed themselves repeatedly. Listen.
As a result, the proposed constitutional amendment has been ratified and is now part of the Virginia Constitution. The Circuit Court attempted to interfere with that democratic process by halting it. This court properly put a stop to that. The challengers here now try to overturn the results of that democratic process. This court should not countenance that either.
I don't understand that as a legal argument, given that you asked us to invoke our, ironically enough, named Scott decision from over 100 years ago that specifically says you don't deal with any potential procedural irregularities before the people have voted. So saying that the people have voted yes after having said you don't even look as to whether there's a procedural irregularity and after it's voted doesn't add anything to the equation, does it?
No, and to be perfectly clear, we're not arguing that this court lacks jurisdiction to review whether the constitutional requirements of Article 12 have been complied with. It does. Instead, I'm saying that on the merits, this court should not accept the challenger's arguments.
But the fact that there's a yes vote doesn't tell us anything about those merits.
No, it does not.
Crazy.
So Democrats asked the court to delay a ruling on the amendment until after the voters went to the polls. The court agrees, voters go to the polls, and then when the court goes to rule on the amendment, the Democrat lawyers say that they can't do so because the voters went to the polls, and now they're arguing that the judges are interfering with democracy or whatever. This is the level of bad faith argument you get from these people.
Terrible,
and yet,
terrible,
as bad
terrible.
as the case was for Democrats, this was only a 4-3 decision by the Virginia Supreme Court to strike down the amendment. Only one Democrat-appointed judge joined the others to make this obvious call. The other 3 judges, in their dissent, tried to argue that early voting doesn't count as the start of an election. They came up with a very strained argument to justify an illegal Democrat power grab. And now that the argument has failed, you could probably guess how the left is responding.
Pissed.
Here's
so
Hassan
mad.
Piker with a post
He's
that
so
received
mad.
4.5 million views and 41,000 likes.
It's crazy.
Quote, the Virginia Supreme Court denied the results of the redistricting referendum. SCOTUS gutted the Voting Rights Act, and Tennessee carved up the last Dem district, destroying black voter power in the state. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable.
What's he mean by that? What's he
They
insinuating?
have just one response to every setback. And it's been this way for 60 years.
Straight up.
Their
This
brains immediately go
to violence.
Kill everybody who stands in our way. And indeed, that was the thinking during the civil rights era as well. Here's our argument. Let us do what we want.
Or we'll kill
Then their
them.
argument fails because it's a bad argument. And then they say, okay, well, we're just going to kill everybody then. And that's why those innocent people in San Francisco and New Orleans and Marin County and many other cities were blown away. Civil rights activists were not using logic and persuasion. They were using force. They were breaking the law. And that's exactly what they're doing today. This is from the New York Times. This article was published yesterday. Quote, during a private discussion on Saturday that included Democratic House members from Virginia and Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York.
And that's another thing, too. It's like, track the logic. The left has always been violent. It's the revolutionary aspect of it. They've been violent. And you could especially see that in the past, 5 years. You've seen it with the Charlie Kirk thing. You've seen it with the multiple attempts on Donald Trump. You can see it, across the board. I've been to so many rallies, okay? Been to so many rallies. A person from the left could walk all the way over to a Trump rally and nobody's going to care. As long as you aren't inciting anything or you aren't openly, going crazy, nobody's going to care. If you put on a red hat that says, make America great again, and you walk over to the left side, what is going to happen to you? You think they're going to respect you? You think they're going to be like, you know what? We're going to have peaceful dialogue? Or are they going to be like, hey, we already agree that political violence is necessary. Like, I've seen this over and over, and that's what pushed me to get more political. I went into this kind of open-minded and neutral, and I actually went to my first Trump rally to try to kind of troll and try to find some people that were kind of outlandish. I could not find anybody. And then somebody was like, hey, Antifa's around the corner. And I said, Antifa can't be around the corner. I just heard on CNN the other day that Antifa's not even real. It's not even real. It's just like an idea. But no, all of a sudden, when I walked around that corner, that idea was about 300 people deep, and they all had weapons, no signs. They had shields, weapons, and they were goose stepping, throwing like firecrackers or fireworks at people, hitting people with bike locks. And that's when I realized it's not as it seems. If you believe the narrative, you're going to believe that the right wing is full of violent white supremacists, and then you're going to believe that the left is the party of like love and inclusion and this. It's not true. It's a giant joke. It's not real. Inclusion. If you think they're inclusive, go tell them. If you think they're inclusive, just be like, yeah, I don't think a man can be a woman. So go see how inclusive they are when you tell them that. Go say, hey, yeah, I only think there's only two genders. Go see how inclusive they are. Go tell them, hey, you know what? I think that abortion is murder. Go see how inclusive they are with you. See how much they're going to embrace you.
The minority leader, the lawmakers vented anger at their defeat at the Virginia Supreme Court, spoke about a collective determination to flip 2 or 3 Republican-held seats under the existing map, and discussed a bank shot proposal to redraw the congressional lines anyway, according to 3 people who participated in the call and 2 others who were briefed on it. Yes, Democrats are planning a bank shot proposal. What is that proposal? Where they're going to lower the retirement age on the court to 54 years old, forcing the removal of every judge, and then they're going to appoint new judges, who agree with them.
Yep.
According to the New York Times, that's not an insurrection or a criminal conspiracy or a plan to destroy the rule of law in Virginia. Instead, it's a bank shot proposal. And senior Democrats are seriously considering it, even though, again, they clearly...
But yet, if the right did this, if the right came up with that proposal and that's the way they were maneuvering, they would lose their minds. They would lose their minds.
He broke the law in the first place. Democrats motivate their base to support this treason by relentlessly lying about everything, including our history. Here's a Tennessee lawmaker named London Lamar. Listen.
London Lamar?
This is a deliberate plan to take away the black vote. Black people aren't Democrat and Republican. We vote our issues. And so far, the black people in Memphis...
Do you hear this already? You hear this like racial pandering that black people aren't Democrat or Republican? She's the spokesperson for all black people. Like my black conservative friends, they're not Republican. They just vote for their issues. Like as a black person, you can't even, she just said, as a black person, you can't even be political. You can't have a political party.
It's about their issues, and to see them act like they don't know what they're doing and deliberately take away our ability to have a solid voting power and representation in Congress is one of the most egregious acts since Reconstruction. Our ancestors died. They are bodies all across fields and in rivers across this country because they marched, they were lynched, they were beaten just to advocate for the right to vote. And to see them do this in 2026 is a direct insult on the black community. Everything that we contribute to the Tennessee, all our tax dollars, what we do to make this state the state that it is, they are deliberately taking our voice away, and it's appalling.
Now she's acting like black people are losing the right to vote instead of losing the custom-made majority black districts, which are specifically created for black people. And no,
that's right. I can't understand how that's not racist. Explain how that's not racist.
Other race, and she's trying to sell this lie in the most ridiculous, hyperbolic fashion she possibly can. She says, quote, there are bodies all across fields and in rivers across this country because they marched
just bodies
just advocating for the right to vote. That's not true at all. Incidentally, there's many, many more bodies of white people who fought to free slaves all over this country. Not even close. But many, many, many more white people died for the freedom of black people than black people died fighting for that freedom. But those white people apparently don't deserve their own special white majority districts carved out especially for them.
Nope.
Why might that be? Now, AOC might have an answer for us. Watch.
The American Revolution was against the billionaires of their time. And we are declaring independence from such an extreme marriage of wealth and power and the state.
Now, AOC is too dumb to make it convincing, but you need to understand that every history book and every mainstream news outlet is run by people who think the exact same way. You can't trust them to tell you the truth about any aspect of our history. For them, it's always a means to an end. And of course, the American Revolution was led by the wealthiest men in America. It was not by any stretch of the imagination a revolt against people who happen to have a lot of money, or else we would not have chosen George Washington as our leader, along with Jefferson, Hancock, and so on. These were not impoverished men. Let's put it that way. The revolution was actually about political representation, and freedom, and ending the tyranny of the state. And that last thing is something Democrats now embrace to a greater degree than ever. These people think you belong in prison if you violate a pointless social distancing mandate.
Remember
they
that?
think you should die if you say things on college campuses that they don't like.
Yep. R.I.P., man.
They have nothing in common with the founders, which is why they feel the need to lie about them. And AOC tells lies like this for a living, of course. Watch.
There are very few,
I have a hard time even listening to this woman talk. I'm sorry. I have a hard time even,
real archetypes of, in my opinion, truly what America is all about. I think about the civil rights and voting rights movement and how Black Americans really created democracy in this country.
That's exactly right.
How they literally made something from nothing.
So again, she's pitching to us that Black Americans in this country created democracy.
It is just beyond me. I think about how, Native people have survived.
What is she talking about?
Preserved and treasured their culture.
Is she drunk?
I think about, and I think many of us think about immigrants, which if you aren't from one of those first.
How? This is spaghetti brain. This is somebody that's in our government. This is a politician. This is a politician,
Two populations, you are certainly from largely the third. And so many of us have our story of our parents, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. And who come and make something from nothing. And I think that's a big part of also the most inspiring elements of what America is all about.
What did she even say? What did she even, what was that?
All of that, of course, is nonsense. Put aside the fact that white men wrote the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. Put aside the founders' reliance on great thinkers of the European Enlightenment, none of whom were black. Put aside the fact that nearly all of the people who invented the concept of democracy and propagated it for thousands of years across the Western world were all white. And most of all, put aside the fact that white men ended slavery. Not only in this country.
Not just white, it's not just white men that ended slavery. White Christian men ended slavery. And without white Christian men, slavery would still be widespread. So, talk that. Because that's what people need to know all day. I go and do these street interviews. I ask, who created slavery? They'll say, white people. And then I'll be like, well, that can't be true. It existed in every different society. And then I ask who ended slavery, and they're like, huh? It's like, dude, Is it just the propaganda, or are you that low IQ? That's what I want to know. So if anybody is watching or rewatches this, please drop in the comments. Is it that the propaganda is so strong that they just defer to the propaganda, or that they're so low IQ that they would believe that white people exclusively invented slavery, but and we're not the ones that actually ended it? Which is, how do you rewrite history to that degree?
But also across most of the world, with the notable exception of Africa, where it was Africans who resisted the end of slavery, and
they still do.
Clung to the institution all the way into the 20th century.
They still do.
What you need to know in order to be a Democrat in 2026 is that black people invented democracy in America. That's the important point. This is a real life version of one of the best tweets of all time. It goes something like this. A black woman invented the telescope. You might disagree. You might even have evidence to the contrary. But you have to ask yourself, is this really worth losing my job over? A black woman invented the telescope.
It's true.
Now imagine being a member of a party that actually unironically thinks like this. Every day they have to find new ways to lie, not only about American history, but also about things that Americans can perceive with their own eyes. To give just one example, every major media outlet refers to teen takeovers occurring in major cities all over the country. We're told that rowdy teens are
rowdy teens. It's just rowdy teens.
Destroying property, flooding into the roads, driving recklessly, assaulting one another, and police when they intervene. What's never mentioned is that virtually everyone participating in these teen takeovers is black. Watch.
It's just rowdy teens. It's just rowdy teens. It's just rowdy teens.
I need some of the units that have their vehicle over at Gasparilla Plaza. If they can return to their vehicle, we need somewhere to put these 1015s in.
Where are the parents at?
Vehicles at Gasparilla Plaza, please return to your vehicle.
Well, it looks like a scene from Somalia, but this is what America looks like right now. In fact, that last clip where the mom pushes a police cruiser was taken in a nice area of Chicago. And if you're a Democrat, you have to pretend the problem is teenagers, not black teenagers. But mentioning the race of the criminals in their view might give the people the wrong idea about the civil rights movement and its consequences. So it goes unmentioned. In service of the myth of systemic racism.
And that's what I said earlier. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's pretty bad.
Relevant data is also suppressed in universities and everywhere else. Take a look at this chart, for example, which was reported by the researcher Zach Goldberg, which you can see right here. It's from the National Longitudinal Study of Youth from 1979 to 2018, which is obviously a very comprehensive time frame. The chart shows that on average, white people make more money than blacks and Hispanics, but if you control for IQ, there's basically no wealth gap whatsoever. In other words, black people who have high IQs do just as well as white people and Hispanic people with high IQs. Obviously, this is a very problematic finding for people who believe that systemic racism is somehow keeping black people down, and therefore you're simply never told about it.
Interesting.
You're also never told that the poorest white families with an income of less than $10,000 a year have a lower murder rate than black families making over $85,000 a year.
Look at that.
That's another very inconvenient fact. And once again, it just doesn't just complicate the narrative, it destroys it.
Yep.
So no school ever teaches their students about it, and no mainstream media organization ever mentions it, ever. A couple of years ago, this monologue might have ended on that note. I would have closed out by saying that we're in for another civil rights movement, meaning a lot more lying and anti-white violence. But there's actually reason for optimism right now. And first of all, in most cases, Republicans simply aren't responding to the propaganda this time around. Take a look at this remarkable video from Alabama, for example. There was a tornado warning and a siren was blaring in the legislature, but the Democrats stayed in the chambers for an important redistricting vote anyway, even as Democrats screamed at them. Watch.
Okay, so now they didn't did the they were gonna do the closure. Now they just gonna take the vote over us. Oh, I forgot I got in trouble already. Okay, now y'all can see. Look at the mayhem.
Mayhem.
The mayhem.
Just mayhem.
That some people have left, but we all in here. We all in here. That's right. I know that's right. No!
What am I watching? What is
So
it?
all this mayhem.
All the mayhem. This looks like a
Y'all see it now.
a takeover. How is this mayhem?
So they know that we need to be in the basement. So after we vote, now they telling us to step out, but I'm videoing.
Now, if we had more Republicans like this in the 1960s, the country would be in a much better place today. The appropriate response when Democrats resort to flagrant propaganda and intimidation in an effort to unleash more racial violence is to take every available measure, as long as it's moral and lawful under our Constitution, to minimize their political influence. Risk your life if you have to, as they were in this case, if a tornado came. Nothing is more important right now. As a result of the Supreme Court's decision and all the redistricting that followed in states like Alabama, Republicans suddenly have a very good chance of holding the House in the midterms. It's not a lost cause anyway. Democrats would have to win all 11 toss-up states to get a majority. Prior to the redistricting, Democrats were the favorite by far. Now that Republicans can draw their own districts without having to carve out several black-only districts, the GOP has the advantage. One by one, Democrats are losing their ability to cheat. Once the census comes in, they'll lose even more seats. And if we had passed the SAVE Act and ensured election integrity, there's a real possibility that Democrats would have been finished as a party.
That's it.
Now, if Republicans are going to win this battle, and it's going to be a very...
If you guys, I'm not trying to get too political with you, but I'm telling you, if the SAVE Act was pushed through and basically cheating wasn't allowed, the Democrats would be absolutely finished. They wouldn't have a chance.
A long-running fight, even though we're ahead right now. It's vital for everyone in this country to be exposed to the actual history of the United States. And in particular, we need to revisit the civil rights era. It's important so that Americans can recognize the extent of the lies they're being fed and who's bankrolling those lies. It's also important so that Americans can understand the vast consequences of allowing black activists and leftist radicals to obtain power and unleash anti-white racial warfare on innocent people for generations. These are consequences that almost nobody talks about. So today, as I mentioned, we're launching the Real History of the Civil Rights Movement, Part 1, A New Constitution. It's available on Daily Wire right now. Part 1 focuses on Martin Luther King Jr. and the biography you're not...
And when that drops, I'm going to cover that.
...not told about, the things you're not told about, the single most influential figure in the civil rights movement. Part 2, which will be available soon, goes into the catastrophic results of the movement, including its impact on the law of equal protection, as well as the decimation of American cities and many other things. Here's an exclusive look at the first 5 minutes of episode 1.
Interesting. That's really, really interesting, man. That's almost like the movie that he did, that a lot of these civil rights leaders, it's more, I'm telling you, when I did my research, it blew my mind. It was, completely blew my mind. Yeah, when these drop on YouTube, I'll definitely, these look awesome.
This has been a project several months in the making. It's the continuation of the Real History series, which has already reached millions of people and enraged the editors of The Atlantic.
Yeah, the Real History of like the American Indian one was mind-blowing too. And then the Real History of Slavery. Well, I should probably just go over those. Those are great. Matter of fact, I'm going to probably do the Real History of Slavery next time. I think I'm going to try that too.
But especially after what we've seen over the past week, I have no problem saying that these are the the two most important episodes of real history that we've done so far. The way to defeat the left's campaign of mass deception is to understand and preserve our shared history, our actual history. And if we can manage to do that, then every sane American will be able to listen to the screeching of black activists and the lies of...
Well, hey, guys, I think that you guys kind of get the point. You know, I think you guys get the point on what was going down here. Let's go just real quick. Let's go look up this because remember, I was told that black people can't be racist. You know what I mean? I was told that black people can't be racist. Where's the one that has the most views? All right, we're going to end off with the zebra murders. Let's just see what they're talking about real quick in the zebra murders. Crime Vault.
1974, the city of San Francisco was under siege. A string of terrifyingly, seemingly random shootings paralyzed the city with fear. The only thing the police knew for sure, all the shooting victims were white and the shooters were black. The violence began in October 1973.
Like, this really was a gang of black dudes that were running around killing, just offing white people. Just all revenge killings for 400 years.
A 28-year-old woman named Frances Rose was shot repeatedly in her car by a random assailant in San Francisco. The following month, a 53-year-old grocery store owner was found shot dead in the store's bathroom. Until the end of 1973, residents of San Francisco lived in fear as the random attacks continued. A man was shot in a telephone booth while making a phone call. Art Agnos, who would become the mayor of San Francisco in 1988, was shot twice in the back but survived. A 31-year-old woman was shot and killed walking down the street. The case became known as the Zebra Murders, not because of the racial overtones of the murders, but because of the name of the radio channel the police used during the investigation. San Francisco police set up a dragnet across the city, stopping all young black men out on the street. If the men were deemed not to be a threat, they were given a zebra card that they could show police if and when they were stopped again for interrogation. The murder stopped suddenly and without explanation as the calendar changed from 1973 to 1974. Over the next 4 months, residents of the Bay Area began to relax their guard, believing that the random terror might be over. They were wrong. On April 1st, the zebra murders started again. Thomas Rainwater, 19, and Linda Story, 21, were shot while walking down the street. Rainwater died from his injuries. Story survived. The attack had all the hallmarks of the zebra case, a lightning-quick random attack carried out by a black man with a .32 pistol who immediately fled the scene. April 14th saw another attack. 2 more people were shot and wounded while standing on a street corner. 2 days later, another murder. A 23-year-old man was shot and killed while rummaging around in his parked car. This second wave of zebra murders brought San Francisco to the edge of panic again. Who was behind the random attacks? When would they be caught? Was anyone safe? The men behind the attacks turned out to be a group of radical Muslims who called themselves the Death Angels. Manuel Moore.
They were radical what? They were radical what were they?
Larry Green, Jesse Lee Cooks, and J.C.X. Simon were all black men in their 20s. They all belonged to the Nation of Islam and were hell-bent on killing white people and sparking a race war.
Have you guys heard of this ever before? Because this is something that I just found recently. Mind-blowing. So now in all my debates, when they're like, black people can't be racist, I'll be like, yo, what about those guys that were running around killing white people strictly because they were white? Were they racist? Or were they just prejudiced?
War. After the final zebra murder in April 1974, a man named Anthony Harris came forward with information. Harris was not a good Samaritan trying to help out the police. He was trying to save his own skin. after he recognized himself in a police sketch that was widely circulated. Harris met the police and told them that while he didn't commit any of the zebra attacks, he was present at several of the shootings. The police knew Harris was telling the truth because he relayed details that they had not released to the public. Police agreed not to press charges against Anthony Harris and to provide new identities for him and his family in exchange for information about the zebra murders.
He got off
On
killing
May
a
1st,
bunch of
1974, the police conducted raids that resulted in the arrests of 7 men associated with the murder spree. Some of the men were released, but Manuel Moore, Larry Green, Jesse Lee Cooks, and J.C.X. Simon were all charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder.
And remember, that's just the people that were charged. Supposedly, there were more men involved in this, and there were much more people killed than what's on this list as well. So,
and attempted murder. Anthony Harris took the stand against his former associates and provided day after day of grisly details regarding the shootings. After a lengthy trial, Moore, Green, Cooks, and Simon were all found guilty in May 1976. At the time, the trial was the longest in California's history. All 4 men were sentenced to life in prison. The official body count of the zebra murder spree was 15 dead, 10 wounded.
Wow.
One criminologist, however, believes that the Death Angels may have killed more people in the early to mid-1970s than all the other serial killers operating during that period combined.
And that's what they'll always bring up in the debates too. What about all the white serial killers? Now I'm just like, but what about... You know what I mean? It's like, doesn't make sense.
There are some who believe the Death Angels may have been responsible for as many as 70 murders.
Oh man, that's crazy, huh? So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully that was interesting. You know, it only covered the beginning of this, you know, the beginning of it only covered what I was kind of wanting to highlight, but maybe when Matt Walsh drops the whole civil rights one, when it's actually out on YouTube, I'll cover the full thing. But like I said, a lot of this has been like a complete false narrative. Once you do your research, things aren't always what they seem. And a lot of this has bred what you see now, the anti-white racism, the polarity that we're having right now, that's based in anything but the truth. So again, what this is all about over here is you can disagree with it, but if you can't refute it, then disregard the whole disagreement. You get what I'm saying? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Off the Books, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Yeah.
Let's keep it off the books, not a secret. It's off the books.